Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts as they share with you the insider's guide to property investing.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, your insider's guide to property investing. I'm Bryce Holdaway, the co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and he's Ben Kingsley, who's the chair of the Property Investment Professionals of Australia and also the current Property Investment Advisor of the Year. How are you, Ben?
Good, mate. Well, okay. Sad news this morning.
Very sad news this morning. I was actually going to come in here and talk about the fact that I'm really disappointed that last night I didn't put my tips in, which gave you an opportunity to get one on me. And that was going to be the big news of this morning. But sadly, there's worse news in that the coach of the Adelaide Football Club has been murdered, which is just shocking news. So for two sport-loving fans like us,
and footy buffs like us, it is. I mean, he's a ex-Collingwood player. I'm well known as a Collingwood supporter. So I remember when a couple of times when I went to Victoria Park with my dad and watched the game, and to see his first couple of games. He played on the wing. He was an elite mover and beautiful kick and just obviously couldn't get his body right. We didn't see him enough. And so he ended up going off to Richmond and then finished up with the Brisbane, where he won a best and fairest. And then obviously, he's had a full-time career in the sport that he loved and he was passionate about what he did. And unfortunately, he's had a domestic dispute with his son, and it's caused his early exit from the stage, which is just tragic.
That's horrific news. So, look, it's I only found out 20 minutes ago, folks, so I'm kind of a little bit stunned by that, but, best wishes to his family in a really terrible event. But today we are going to talk about buyer's agents.
Yes.
And obviously something that I do for a living, but you've also thrown your hat in the ring in many times, in many states, in many places, Ben. But my show on the Lifestyle Channel on Foxtel often brings a profile to what buyer's agents actually do. But it's fair to say not everyone in this country has Foxtel, sadly. But
do yourself a favour.
Yeah, that's right. Lifestyle Channel. But buyer's agents are very, very common in the United States, for example, where everyone's used to dealing with a real estate agent who is looking to sell on behalf of the seller, and their client is the seller and get the best outcome for the seller. But in Australia, buyer's agents are becoming very common. Actually, they're becoming more popular, I should say, because they're helping level the playing field and helping buyers get the best opportunity to not only level the playing field when it comes to dealing with a real estate agent, but help them actually make a good decision when it comes to investing in a property.
Yeah, so as Bryce was saying, in the US, you make a network of someone who works on behalf of the seller, and you list the property, and then if you're looking to buy, it's very traditional to hook up and connect with a buyer's agent, and they liaise and do all the running around and so forth, and they sort of do a conjunctional episode over there where they usually split commissions. In Australia, what we're seeing is a more mature attempt at the seller working in the best interest of the vendor and the buyer's agent working in the best interests of the selling agent, that is, and the buyer's agent working in the best interests of the buyer. And a good buyer's agent will charge a fee for service, and some will also charge a commission, a flat commission for what the work they do. And that sits comfortably for the owner-occupier who might be time poor. So, your entry-level buyer's agent is one who should be a good communicator, understand the client's needs, get the brief right, build nice rapport, and then try and understand what they're out there to do from an owner-occupier point of view. And that's obviously what you do on the show.
Yeah, well, quite often for most of my professional life, I've dealt with investors, but with the show I deal with owner-occ. So there is a different skill set, and I always sort of describe it as, if you're buying an investment, there's no emotion. If you don't like green kitchens, it doesn't matter.
No.
Because if I buy a property that's got a green kitchen in it, we can solve that challenge later, or maybe not even at all because you're never going to live in it.
Correct.
It's effectively a bricks-and-mortar bank account.
Yep.
But buying for an owner-occ...
bricks-and-mortar bank account, I like that. Can we write that down somewhere?
It's interesting that you comment on that because during the week, I've used it a couple of times when I'm talking to a client because there's, we always talk about the location doing 80% of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a couple of clients this week about cracking properties that have done really well, but they look ugly.
Yeah, the old ugly duckling.
And they're not going to pull the photos out at a barbecue and impress their friends with what they look like. But as I said to them, impress them with your ugly money, because they've delivered over time. When you're actually taking the second holiday or whatever it is that drives you in 10 years' time when this property's performed, and they're remembering the barbecue where they laughed at your photos, that's really what matters. So a bricks and mortar bank account is effectively what we're trying to find for an investor. But an owner-occupier, it's like my wife saying to me, "Can you go and buy me a red dress?"
Yeah.
Danger.
Harder work.
Yeah. Slim fitting, loose fitting, short, long. What shade of red? I mean, that's the
fire
brief.
engine red or ruby red or.
That's what it's like doing an owner-occupier brief.
I wouldn't take on that assignment, Bryce.
You've been married a bit longer than me. You're a bit wiser. But ultimately, there's the mechanics of facilitating a transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller are similar for an owner-occupier and investor, but the process is really quite different.
Yeah, you've got to take the owner-occupier out. You've got to let them, smell it, see it, touch it, visualise it, get their emotional connection to it. So there is an advantage in using a buyer's agent for owner-occupier, because effectively, if they are so emotionally attached to it, I'll give you an example. I'm working for a couple out of Indonesia at the moment who are Australian expats, and we're looking to buy a property on the Sunshine Coast. And they have the property, but it's outside their budget, and it's been sitting on the market for a good month or so now, and they're actually going there for holidays this weekend. So they arrive tomorrow. And the property price, we're hoping to get it for sort of around the $1.5 million mark. So they've extended their budget, but she's so attached to this property visually that I've had to tell her, I've had to instruct her via email and via phone how I want her to walk through the property. She's not allowed to say a thing, and she sent me an email back last night saying, I don't know how the kids will react because they're going to really like it. So I went back to her and said the kids are not allowed to go through the house, pure and simple, because I don't want them to think, because they're going to have a look at half a dozen houses up there whilst they're on holidays. I don't want them to compare it to that one when it's outside the budget. So that's why you try. Hence, you negotiate on their behalf, because they'll pay it. And your job is to try and reduce that ability and use your skill in negotiation.
Michelle watches the show. She should know that we never bring the kids through the first 40 minutes of the show. It's only towards the end that we bring
That's
them.
True. We'll just give them Michelle's name. If you're listening, Michelle, yes.
Hey, I used to go to the Royal Show in Perth, which was a big thing over there. It was about August. We used to get the show, the show bags and the rides and all that sort of stuff. And I remember my mum and dad used to take me to the middle of the showgrounds, and there'd be all the cows. The farmers would be showing their prize cows. And to me, they just looked like four-legged animals of the same colours. But if I was sitting next to a farmer, he'd have been looking at the same thing that I was looking at and would have seen something totally different. He would have seen
the neck, the girth, the leg coverage, the range.
Exactly. He'd have seen which one was a healthy one, which one was a not so healthy one, which is the one that would probably be good for stock. I wouldn't have a clue.
No.
And I kind of think that's a bit the same as a buyer's agent. If you've been doing this long enough, I can look at a property and just go, yes, no, get out of my chair and have a look, versus, no, that's no good, just based on experience, intuition, training, all those sorts of things. And I think that's the challenge that people face, because one of the reasons that real estate's so good is because it's an asset that's not dominated by investors. So you can get a competitive advantage, but in terms of if you do the science like we do, but ultimately the false sense of security is I live in a house, therefore I know what makes for a good investment.
Yeah, and that's the classic one. It's like, I've grown up in bricks and mortar. I know my street, so it can't be that hard. Every property surely does the same thing. They all grow in value, but the reality is they don't. And we've talked about, the difference between a 1% and a 2% capital gain over 20 years. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it comes back to, I think, the point you're making there about that emotional attachment and making sure that from an owner-occupier point of view, you're getting away from that emotional attachment and using the skill. And the other thing, how many properties do you think we look at? Got to be 500 a week, wouldn't it?
Oh, easy.
So we've got enough time to look at 500 properties a week, whereas most people they're looking at Friday night or Thursday night after hours, and then Saturday morning they're rushing before they go out and do the fall that they want to go and see, and usually it's in their own backyard. And I think that's a good segue into the investment space around the best buyer's agents in the country are borderless buyer's agents.
Agreed.
And by that I mean that because this is about an investment return, and the same just irrespective of buyer's agents, but the best buying may not be in your own backyard. It may not be in your own state. So from that point of view, you've got to obviously do your research. And if you don't have the capacity to buy interstate, you need to look for a buyer's agent from an investment point of view that can give you those types of skills and have the resources and the research to prove that it's the best time to buy in other states, like we're obviously doing in Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia.
Well, I bought in every state and territory of this country, and frustratingly for me, trying to have a television show running around in individual states that have different contractual processes is a challenge. So
absolutely, it would be.
That's another, I guess, reason that you'd want to use a buyer's agent, particularly if they're going to be borderless, because Sydney's different to Queensland, which is different to Melbourne, which is different to Adelaide. Yep. They've got very, very different systems that you have to operate within just to buy a property. And so the agents often have the competitive advantage, given that you don't necessarily transact. Like we bought 3 properties this week, we bought 4, we're buying properties all the time. So we're familiar and getting used to it. So that's a big challenge for people who want to try and buy interstate as well. A, it's a good reason to buy interstate. B, it's often a challenge.
It is. So when you are looking to work with someone who's a buyer's agent, because there's also some muddy waters out there. There's a lot of people who call themselves property mentors, property coaches, investment coaches, investment specialists, etc. That you need to understand that they may not be qualified to understand the buying process in regards to the contractual work that needs to be done. So if you're looking to engage a buyer's agent that can work interstate or that is working in that state, they need to be a licensed real estate agent.
Correct.
That's what you truly are as a buyer's agent, a licensed real estate agent. I wouldn't be taking my advice from a property coach who doesn't know how to negotiate and secure the contract and get the property settled successfully, or that I could, liaise with to make sure that I can get that done. That's the big challenge for me. And obviously in my seat as PIPA, I'm always saying you've got to be working with the qualified and licensed professionals, and don't take your advice from a mortgage broker for property. Take your advice from a property advisor or a buyer's agent in regards to the specific property.
Yeah, look, you talked about PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Our business is a member of that. We're also a member of REBAA, which is the Real Estate Buyers Agency Association, and they've got a very stringent criteria that they use for letting someone become part of their membership. And I actually think that that's a good thing, because they actually want to check out their bona fides to make sure that they are a legitimate buyer's agent.
So tell us a little bit about REBAA.
Yeah, so effectively it's a body that is an association where they want to be the peak industry for buyer's agents, and they're doing a really good job of getting the best in the country to come on board. But that filtering process, I think, is good, because one of the challenges, and we've talked about it through different threads in our podcast, is that people are unfortunately getting advice from people who often have their own agenda at heart. So we're very open. We run a commercial business, but we put the client as the centre of our universe. And then if we help them get what they want, we'll get everything we want. Is kind of the philosophy that we work with here. So that in our industry, you're seeing a lot of people who have the opposite of that. See what I can get out of it first, and hopefully the other guys don't burn in the process. So I guess by using associations as a filtering process, like PIPA, like REBAA, gives you the best chance of dealing with the best people.
Correct. So basically what you're saying is you can use REBAA or PIPA, get onto their website, and you can search for buyers agents in your area. So again, that's a great starting point. The second set of criteria that you want to look at is, have they got any property investment experience? Because I know very early on in our business, we were approached, before we had the buyers agency business set up, we were approached by a lot of people who are claiming to be buyers agents, and they were former selling agents who have jumped the fence to be buyers agents. but they've got no pedigree. They've got no experience in property investment. All they know how to do is buy in their own backyard. And for me, that's limiting the returns that you could potentially get through, exploring or opening your horizons to get the right team, the right professionals in your team to get the best returns.
How good was the analogy that we heard with talking to our friend Michael Pope during the week, and he said, you wouldn't want to go into have a major operation without the anaesthetist turning up.
Yeah,
you've got the specialist in there, you've got the brain surgeon, whatever it is. But if the anaesthetist doesn't turn up, you're not going to stay asleep, or you're not going to wake up.
Well, someone can put you to sleep. Like one of those other people in the room would know how to do it, but would they do it properly?
And waking you up is the key.
Correct. Yeah. Not waking you up too early, I reckon, is the key.
Agreed. So I think that's a sort of an extension of your point, isn't it? If you're taking advice from someone who half knows what they're talking about, a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous.
Yeah, and that's it for me. I talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 BAs, buyers agents. Tier 3 knows how to build rapport, can sell a bit of their own story, but that's it. They don't necessarily have any investment experience. Tier 2 has the investment experience and maybe a formal qualification in there as well in terms of property investment. They're qualified to do that. And then your tier 3 is your tier 1. Your tier 1 is your supreme buyer's agent. They are the ones who are licensed in multiple states. They're borderless research, and they're trying to get the very, very best returns in the right time in that market. And if you can put that together, you're working with the best of the best.
That's a very good point, folks. I'm a BA all day, every day, and my life pretty much looks around scanning and skimming through every property that's either on market, off market, or advanced listing. And by advanced listing, I mean I get lots of real estate agents ringing me up saying I've just left a listing appointment. I've got the signed authority. It's number 22 Smith Street in blah blah, and you guys should go and check it out. And it gives me, often up to 1 or 2 weeks head start on the rest of the competition. I can move very, very quickly. So I'm looking at properties all the time. I'm physically walking through scores and scores of properties and rejecting most of them, and then making recommendations to clients based on whether or not I think it stacks up as an investment grade property within an investment grade suburb. Because we talked a couple of podcasts ago about how location will do 80% of the heavy lifting. But if you get the property wrong, you can actually cancel out all of that benefit, because you could be in the right suburb, get the wrong property and see zero growth. So it's not just about getting the right suburb, although it's hugely important. You need to buy the right property. So that's what my week largely entails. I then do a lot of back testing to make sure that the assets actually stacked up. Because Ben, you've got a theory on properties. History is an indicator of the future, unlike equities.
Yeah, I do. The thing with equities is that if you're looking at a listed company, they've got a board of directors and then they've got an executive management team. That management team have a couple of levers to pull to get return to shareholders, because at the end of the day, if you're a listed company, your return to shareholders is a very, very big part of what you do. So the levers you can pull inside a business are products and services. So the creation of new products and services, like Apple is a great example of thought leaders in that space. If you've got pretty stable products and services, then the other things you look at is for efficiencies. So you look for economy. So you look to cut costs to get a better return, or you look to expand and you put more resources in with a view of getting better volume. So they're your levers that you pull in terms of running a business to try and get a better return. And when businesses are faced with those challenges, the other thing they can also do is acquire new businesses or expand too quickly, or just manage the execution poorly, and that affects the share price. Because the shareholders, mainly the big institutional investors, they don't want a share price that's not moving in some direction, or they're not getting the yields that you promised them. So there's always pressure and force to make decisions inside those businesses. A property, it's just standing there. It's it's not moving anywhere. The land's not going anywhere. So it doesn't have the same pressures on it. It's not being judged. It's not making calls in the marketplace. It's living inside a marketplace, and it's being driven by the external factors. But if those external factors are fairly reliable and consistent, then the historical performance of that asset is an absolute excellent means for future prediction of its return. And you only need to do historical regression analysis on properties to see that the correlation coefficient is really strong, which means that there is a real strong relationship between its historical performance and its future performance. Because at the end of the day, property is driven by people, and the emotional buyer, the owner. I've said this before. 70% of the market's controlled by owner-occupiers. They buy with emotion. They drive the area return, and that's why we're more focused on area than the actual physical asset. But that's the skill of the buyer's agent and the research team that are putting all that together to put a story together for that time-poor buyer, or that buyer who's acknowledged that they don't have the level of skill, they don't have the pedigree, they don't have the experience to get the job done. So they entrust that in the hands of a professional to do the job.
There you go, folks. There's some information you probably should listen to again, because that is very, very valid. I use that particular thought process every day of my professional life, because we actually do back test every single property that we're interested in buying as a final check to make sure that it performs. And most people don't really get the opportunity to do that, Ben. But what you just said then is something that we've seen time and time again. So it's not a theory, it's actually in practice that actually does stack up. So I guess I just want to finish with, I guess, in terms of what a buyer's agent also has the advantage. This week I put an offer in on a property in Brisbane with an agent that I deal with very, very regularly, bought a number of properties over the last sort of month with them. And up there, in the conditions that they've got, quite often they say, look, it's highest and best offer. They make you sign a form that says, make sure it's your best offer. We're not going to give you another crack. It's not a sort of Dutch auction arrangement here. I was one of 6 offers, and my offer wasn't the successful offer. So that agent gave me another call, because I did lots of business with them, and said, you know what, you're not actually in front. These are the reasons why.
Another great reason to use a BA.
Here's why we think it's value. And to be honest, my offer was a little bit on the cheeky side. So I knew where value actually was, and I knew I had some margin to move. And I actually moved my offer. And, in full consultation with the client, and they were fully aware of what we were doing. And we actually secured the property. And over time, that's the position that this property is in is going to return them in spades. And the general buyer doesn't get that particular opportunity, because as much as textbook says, you're only going to get one crack at it, the person who is listing the property knows that they're the best property manager in the area, so they know I'm going to recommend my clients to use them for property management. So therefore, this favour does come around for a agent.
And I know we're running out of time, but I want to use another thing. When I'm researching a new area and going into that marketplace for the first time for the business, as you know, I go into areas and assess them based on our leading indicators from the research we do in Melbourne. And I fly into that market and go and have a look around. When I'm inspecting the properties, the first thing I do is hand my business card over and say, Ben from Empower Wealth, we buy between 100 and 150 properties a year for our clients. And I just watch their eyes and ears light up. The good ones, the bad ones, it's lost on them. Yep. But the ones that understand, wait a minute, he's not a single buyer. He's a connector. This guy could come in and buy 10 or 15 properties in this particular marketplace. So all of a sudden, I'm their best friend. The good agents. And that's when I get the gold in terms of, the blind spots, the history of the area, what's going on, what assets that they can potentially introduce me to, what are the good agents, what are the bad agents, because they're trying to build rapport with me, because I'm a buyer in, usually, if our science is right, we buy pre the move. Yeah. So we're trying to buy in the bottom of the market. So they're thinking, these properties have been on market for a bit of time here. I've got a bit of stock that's going to be absorbed pretty quickly. He can move a bit of my stock. Now, of course, the asset's got to stack up and the street's got to blah, blah, blah. But that's an interesting part about, again, another example where we'll get pre-markets, off-markets, advanced listings and second attempts, because he knows that, or she knows that we represent multiple buyers, so they're going to give us a good chance to try and win the property. And that's the really great agent who gets that.
Very, very good point, Ben. Now, and we have raced through 20 minutes, which happens every week, and we talk about it every week, so the listeners are probably sick of us saying it every week. But I guess there's 4 ways a property investor will pay. Time doesn't allow, but maybe if we can just make a note in the next week or 2, we might actually have a whole podcast around that, because I think there's some real gold around the 4 ways that a property investor will pay. So as we sign off, a couple of quick things. We want to thank all of the listeners who are sharing the podcast with all of their friends. Our growth each week in terms of the downloads is exponential. So if you're one of those and you're sharing it with a friend, we sincerely thank you for doing that. We certainly are looking, this is the highlight of our week, to get together and have a bit of a chin wag about the things that we're putting into practice throughout the week. So thank you for that. If you do get a chance to go to our website, thepropertycouch.com.au, or the iTunes store or the Android store, some people have been leaving some really great 5-star reviews, which we really appreciate. And the reason I'm saying that is because the more of those that we get, the higher we rank within those systems, and the better opportunity we've got for more people to listen.
We help.
Exactly. So we thank you to those. We've got lots of questions coming through on the website, which we will definitely cover in the upcoming episodes. And Ivis, who helps us out here, sends all of the new episodes out via our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all sort of the Property Couch hashtags and sign-ins and all that sort of stuff. So if you're a social media follower and you're not following on those, you can go to that. She often takes behind-the-scenes photos, so you can keep in tune with what we're doing. And finally, Ben, before we sign off, our thoughts go to the family and the Adelaide Crows Football Club.
Yeah, there might have been a bit of soft energy today, but that's pretty relative to the big picture here. And investing and financial well-being is good, but it's not as good as family and the whole human story.
So true, and so we hope that you get an opportunity to spend the weekend with your kids this weekend as well. So it's been fun. Until next week, Ben, which part of the world are we signing off on?
Oh, well, sayonara.
Sayonara?
Sayonara.
There you go, folks. Sayonara. See you next week.